Hello, and welcome to this episode, the 13th episode of the KurosawaCast. I am, as ever, Rob Beams, a Kurosawa fan, and I'm joined, as ever, by a newbie to the world of Kurosawa, watching them all with me in chronological order, film teacher and filmmaker, Mr. Craig Ernest. Hello, how are you, Craig?
I'm good, yeah, on this fine Easter Saturday morning. Is that a day?
I guess it must be. Let's say it is. It is now. So we're tackling today. Tackling is probably the correct word for it. We're tackling Kurosawa's The Lower Depths, which is the second film he released in 1957. Interesting, both the films he released in 1957 are adaptations of plays, aren't they? But the first one, Throne of Blood, very much adapted in his own image, in a kind of not fantasy, but a kind of high historical drama with fantasy elements. Very, very obviously adapted to be a film, very filmic. And this is basically a filmed play, and it's interesting, the two different approaches. Do you have any prior knowledge of Gorky, any prior knowledge of this play? Because I don't.
I know there's an 80s film called Gorky Park.
Okay.
But I know nothing. I think I said before, I'm completely ignorant of Russian literature. I never wandered around with a copy of Dostoevsky in my back pocket as a young man or as a student. I've never dug into I don't even know if this is an actual writer, but I've never dug into Pushkin. Is that right?
Isn't Pushkin the character in The Idiot?
All right, okay, there you go. That shows how ignorant I am.
I haven't read any. My wife is a massive Russian literature buff, but I've not read any at all. But what's interesting is Kurosawa was clearly very reverent of the Russian classics. One of the criticisms of The Idiot, which was the previous Kurosawa film that we really weren't into, was from Donald Ritchie, the foremost Kurosawa scholar. One of the criticisms of The Idiot was that Kurosawa's reverence for the book, an absolute kind of love of Dostoevsky, blinded him into trying to make this like way too minute by minute, scene by scene accurate adaptation of it, which originally for the film The Idiot was like this 6-hour movie that got trimmed down into the version we have today. And I feel like maybe that's at play here as well. Like maybe he's so reverent of the Russian classics that he's just like, no, you can't do it any different to how the play goes. But anyway, I digress slightly. So I'll very briefly explain. I'll just say up front, I don't know if either of us have a lot to say about Lower Depths, so this might be a kind of bonus episode. I'll just give a very brief rundown of what is essentially the plot. It's interesting. After watching The Lower Depths last night, some of it.
I saw you watch. There's a Jean Renoir version. I saw you watch that. I guess that was a last minute panic to try and fill the episode out.
No, I was really curious because this film The Lower Depths is so boring to me, right? Like I've put my mask, my nailing my kind of put to post. I don't know what the phrase is. Nailing my opinion to the wall. I don't know what the phrase is, right? And I found it so boring that I wanted to see whether it was a common thread. It was just that play was boring or what. And what I ended up discovering instead was that the Jean Renoir film, which apparently is a lot less faithful to the play from what I read around it than the Kurosawa version is, really does what you'd sort of expect. If you were a Hollywood cigar-chomping movie producer going to adapt this into a proper, an enjoyable film, you would probably take the most obviously dramatic element, which is Toshiro Mifune plays his character who's a thief.
Let's set the whole thing up.
Well, I was going to say, well, this is part of my explanation of the plot. So, because there isn't a plot at all. It's a bunch of poor people in a house, and they're in a kind of Chaucer style. They have they have titles, they have names in this as well, but in every version of the cast list you'll see, and in the way they refer to each other, they have these like roles, don't they? There's the actor, there's the gambler, there's the thief, there's the landlady, there's the policeman. There's all these different roles that these people play in the film. And I take it that they're broadly supposed to be because of that, probably symbols of stuff to do with social structure and social class and people's different roles that probably went completely over my head. So plot-wise, I don't think the film or the play, if it's as close to this adaptation as it apparently is, does a lot. The only element where there is a strong plot is in one of the subplots, I guess you could call it, which is where Mifune plays a thief, and then there's a landlady played by the same actress who played Lady Macbeth, actually.
Suzu Yamada.
Yeah, Isuzu Yamada, and she just played Lady Macbeth opposite Mifune, and actually kind of plays Lady Macbeth in this as well. Like, she's kind of whispering in his ear, trying to get him to do murders, and they kind of have this kind of this quite interesting chemistry, this quite interesting relationship going on. And the film sort of sparks into life when it's the scenes with them. There's also in the scene,
they've been sort of having an affair behind the landlord's back, but Mifune's lost interest because Yamada, the character's called Asugi, her sister has turned up, and he's now more interested in the sister.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Sugi's sister, Akio, she's played by Kyoko Kagawa, who is a very big figure in Japanese cinema. She is in Tokyo Story. She's in Sancho the Bailiff in a really memorable role. She's in Mothra as well, I think. She's in a lot of very famous Japanese films. And what's interesting about this is that basically this subplot, it has 3 stars of Japanese cinema in it, like 3 bona fide stars of the period of Japanese cinema. And all of the other characters are character actors from the background of other Kurosawa films. You've got, for example, the actor Bokuzin Hidari, who plays the character labeled as the pilgrim or the priest in this. He is the kind of cowardly samurai that Mifune sort of takes under his wing. Not samurai, sorry, the cowardly peasant that Mifune takes under his wing in Seven Samurai. The actor is played by another one of these great kind of Kurosawa character actors, Kamatari Fujiwara, who also turns up in Seven Samurai, is the one who's got the daughter that he's trying to say kind of protect kind of aggressively, and also he turns up in Hidden Fortress as one of the 2 proto C3PO and R2D2 bandit guys at the beginning. So you've got all of these guys, and you could say this with all of the guys in the background, they're all different like character actors from other Kurosawa films, a lot of them, who now kind of take a more central role, and it's interesting to see them have a lot more to do. But the only bit that I would call kind of quote unquote a plot is this thing with Mifune and these other 2 stars of the era who handle this bit, but it's really not the whole film. It's
people sort of chatting about different things, isn't there? So you've got the tinkerer and his wife's slowly dying and talking about how awful everything is all the time, and the tinkerer is kind of like just completely like nonplussed by the fact that his wife is dying, and just sort of shuffling her around and making sure that she's kind of out of the way. And you got the actor who keeps on going on about that he's poisoned himself with booze, and he's going to get better, and he's going to go and take the stage by storm. And all the characters kind of wander in and out, seemingly at random, but going down to a tavern at the end of the road and then coming back, and then they seem to sit around at night and gamble, and then go to bed and wake up and do the same thing the next day, while they all just sort of chat about different things. And then you've got this, I guess the pilgrim is the kind of this old, they all start calling grandfather, who just kind of comes in and sort of tells them all to cheer up, might never happen.
But I think like, just to finish off the bit about the plot, like what I was saying, I don't know if I finished this thought about the Renoir one, is it does feel like the kind of the movieized version of this, because the Renoir one is basically very uncomplicatedly about the love triangle aspect. Right. There's the thief, and you see the thief go and do stuff. You also get loads of it takes place in high society. Loads of scenes of people in tuxes in mansions and stuff. So it's very, very different to this. And it takes it very, it kind of just takes this element of this thief and this love triangle with the sister and the landlady, and it runs with that. And this version, like I say, this is kind of a minor, not a minor element, but it's one subplot in the thing, and almost to the point where Mifune's like, you know, in football terms, like an impact substitute who kind of comes on and kind of revives the game. He sort of saves the game at various points.
Well, it is that kind of it is that kind of I'm going to say I enjoyed this more than you, actually.
Yes.
Because
wouldn't be very hard.
because I think I watched it in optimal conditions on my
Okay.
phone in bed. And I liked the kind of meandering from conversation to conversation and picking up with different people, and then the actor sort of belly aching and moaning, and then getting out of bed and suddenly trying to do a monologue, and then sort of feeling ill and going off, and then them going, yeah, what a twat, and and then moving on, and then talking about their gambling. To me, my hot take, if you like, was this was basically like a sitcom. Like with loads, like a gang sitcom. This was like Cheers or something like that.
It's multi-camera on one set as well, isn't it?
Exactly. That right down to the way that it's shot. Like it is multi-camera. It is a single set. There's no real invention apart from like the very start, where some people are like throwing rubbish into this pit that hits on the roof of the place where because they're literally in like this dugout hole, and you don't leave the place. You might go outside for 15 minutes. And sort of sit outside, but then you come back in. When anybody ever really leaves the flop house, they're just gone, and you wait for them to come back. But it's this little kind of sitcom-y kind of thing, and it's just about getting to know the different characters a little bit. And I found it to have quite a lot of humour. I thought it was quite funny.
Which is interesting, because what you said last time was, at the end, if you remember what you were saying about your anticipation for this, was that it sounds like something that's probably going to be a little bit arch and sort of takes itself very seriously. Whereas if it was let's say like I think you actually said like a Mike Leigh.
I thought this was like a Mike Leigh film.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I really thought this was like a Mike Leigh film. Made me kind of reassess my attitude towards Russian literature and my complete ignorance. It feels like it's the sort of thing where, even if I did dig into one of those books, I wouldn't get it. But somebody much smarter than me, who wasn't overly pretentious, could probably explain it back to me in a way that was quite amusing and point out all the inherent humour. A bit like I used to really like the Mark Steele lectures when they were on BBC Four. I used to watch those all the time, and he used to dig into history and sort of put a bit of a irreverent spin on it and sort of explain the irony and the humour of everything. And I feel like that's what I need. I need a Armando Iannucci or a Chris Morris to like adapt all the greats of Russian literature for me, so I can see what other people see in them. I quite liked it, but it's so slight. It is so slight. It's like I say, it's not just that it reminded me of a sitcom because of the way the characters kind of get introduced. It's like a sitcom because of the way it's staged and it's set and the way people move in and out and the very kind of bare bones plot as is. I mean, there are things that do get resolved, and they're things that happen off camera, aren't they? Like the actor who's kind of
at the end,
kind of like he goes off, he says, "I'm leaving," and then he comes. And then people come back and say, "Oh, he's killed himself," which felt, again, I'm completely ignorant, but felt very Russian.
And this, by the way, like spoilers for not just this, but the Renoir version. That final bit of the actor killing himself, and then it cut into the gambler saying, "What a twat! Like we were having a nice time here." Like,
and then they have the same song.
Yeah. But that final, and it's really well done in the film. Like that's the final line, and then just kind of boom to the end. It's really really good. But apparently, that's also sort of how the play ends. The Renoir version, that just is kind of a love story, ends with the thief and the landlord lady's sister just going off and living happily ever after. And that stuff with the actor just doesn't happen. So it's a really really different version. But one thing I'll say, because I wrote really early watching this that it almost seemed kind of anti-cinema, and I was kind of like, it's clearly like Kurosawa's like least visual movie, and I was kind of really struggling with that aspect, because I was thinking about how in The Quiet Jewel, even, which is another one that's kind of a filmed play that isn't that adventurous and had a very low budget and very few sets, you at least had that scene with the surgery at the beginning in the jungle that was really cool and really well done and really cinematic. And then as I watched the film, I thought differently, actually, because I thought that you don't get kind of crazy camera movements or crazy editing, or you don't get anything really kind of heightened from that perspective. But what you do get, probably because Kurosawa was trying to make this very theatrical stage play on camera, basically, you get amazing blocking. You get really incredible. You do, like, you get there.
I just knew
there are some incredible.
I knew what you were going to say. Is all.
Well, it's true
But
though.
with what you
Like,
got.
well, I don't want to be sniffy about it, because as much as I don't enjoy this film very much, like, I actually, if I was doing the thing that we do each episode with you, with the appreciation versus enjoyment, for me this is solidly in high appreciation, low enjoyment, because watching it with that in mind, I thought some of that composition was stunning. Like, you had these bits where someone would be in the foreground speaking, but then you'd have some business going on in the middle with some people, and there's something else coming in and out in the distance, or all of the bits where the landlady's kind of in the background looking through the window. Little details and staging and how everyone moves around this environment. It's really, really well done. And actually, reading the Ritchie book about it, Kurosawa talked about how he really wanted to make a stage play, and how he wanted to use this film to experiment with what he would do on a stage. And that's kind of interesting. He basically did, just at the risk of sounding kind of reductive, plonk a camera down and then focus on the way people move around this stage, and the way they kind of interact with each other, and the staging of that. And I like the way he kind of at various points divides the room into thirds as well, and he'll have like something going on with the gamblers by a little fire, and then it'll go along to the middle of the room with the, it might even just expand the shot to keep the gamblers in play who we've just seen, but then show the pilgrim in the middle, and then maybe go down to the dying wife. And you've got these kind of dynamic areas of this place, considering it's just one very sparse set and it's actors kind of doing a play. And they, I've read that they filmed this very quickly, but they had 40 days of rehearsal, like full rehearsal in makeup, with the cameras, but with no film in them, just kind of for 40 days doing this thing. So it was all kind of really well blocked out, really well managed. And I appreciate that aspect of it a great deal. I didn't enjoy it, but I appreciate it.
You didn't enjoy it at all?
I enjoyed fits and starts of it. I enjoy the sequence. There's a sequence that kind of builds to a crescendo, isn't there, where Mifune and Yamada are outside in the street, and she accuses him of having actually killed her husband, and there's a big crowd gathers around to watch, and it becomes kind of a lot more high drama for 10-15 minutes, right?
Yeah, that was the stuff I disliked the most.
Okay, because but all that stuff comes in, and it kind of, something's going on, and then after that it seemed like there was an interminable like half an hour more of just in a room. And I was really like, oh, couldn't it have just ended that stuff outside? Why is it still happening? But this is all the play, so it's not like Kurosawa's making a mistake. Like, this is exactly what the play does. But I just don't think it's for me. Like, I'm so bored by it.
I found the kind of the sitting around with nothing happening the most satisfying parts of it. Just people sort of belly aching and chatting, and I liked the fact that there was a broad range of I mean, everyone talks about getting out there and having a better life, but I like the fact that some of them seem to be enjoying themselves anyway, and sort of getting on with things, having a nice little sing song, and I don't know, it just seemed quite warm to me, and like I say, I thought to me it felt like a sort of a gang sitcom, yeah, I think it was diminished expectations, to be honest. I think I went into this expecting to hate it, and the fact that I didn't made me feel a little bit warmer to it.
This is the third time I've seen this film, and what's interesting about it is the second time and the third time I've seen this film, I had no memory of this film at all. And after doing this podcast, I will completely forget about this film, and I will not remember anything about it.
Well, funny, I didn't realize, I did a little bit of reading around, but I've seen another version of this called Souls on the Road, which is another Japanese film by Minoru Murata from 1921.
Okay.
And that's quite a different telling of the story. It's about I don't remember it that well, even though I watched it quite recently, but I think it's about two people who go on the road There's a guy who wants to be a violinist, and his parents don't approve, so he kind of goes off and leaves the comfort and surrounding of his family and ends up going into sort of, staying in this flop house. I don't remember it massively, but I remember it having, it has much more kind of cinematic invention, even for a film in 1921. Like there's these kind of flash forwards, flashbacks, and kind of looks into the future as the characters make choices and try and weigh up what might the eventual outcomes be of their choices, and kind of much more about kind of how life can diverge and how people can end up in these situations to begin with. But I don't remember it particularly well. But I did watch that relatively recently. I think that's available on YouTube as well.
Okay, interesting. No, I hadn't even heard of that one. I'll read very quickly. Just there's a bit in the Ritchie book where he quotes Kurosawa talking about this movie, and he said, "I'd always wanted to make Gorky's play into a movie, into a really easy and entertaining movie. After all, the lower depths isn't at all gloomy. It's very funny, and I remember laughing over it. That is because we're shown people who really want to live, and we're shown them, I think, humorously. People are just supposed to relax and enjoy this picture as they would any programmer," by which he means a standard trashy studio movie. I imagine you see truth in that statement.
Very much so. Yeah. I found it entertaining. Like, I'm sure if I'd been more tuned into the, like you say, everybody's got a role, everybody's got a function, and probably some sort of allegorical place, or perhaps allegorical is not the right word, but everyone's got a function. And if I understood the significance for all that, I'd probably enjoy it and laugh a little bit more. But I did find it quite easygoing, and I enjoyed it. And this made me think again about when we were talking about Soderbergh before, or Linklater as well, to a certain degree as well. I think, like, I wasn't expecting quite so much range in Kurosawa's films, that he can go from big sweeping epics to small experimental almost type films that kind of just, I can imagine this if people have come off, Hidden Fortress, not Hidden Fortress,
Throne of Blood,
you were saying, was like a huge commercial success, and obviously off the back of Seven Samurai as well. I can imagine this alienating people, like if they were Kurosawa fans, and it's like, oh, I'm going to see the new Kurosawa film. It's like, what the fuck is this?
It's
kind of it's almost like that one for them, one for me kind of approach, which I'm quite liking, just the kind of range and depth that he puts into his films, even if it's, like I said, I liked it and I was warm to it. I don't think it's a great movie. I think it was enjoyable, but I like that he tried something different with his next film. It's that sort of
I get that. I one thing I want to bring up as well, you mentioned it in passing, but I think it's really interesting, is the fact that this set that they've designed makes the title of the play very literal, where they're kind of down in this hole. But what's interesting about it is you do get a lot of, when they are outside, you get these low angle shots, and they are surrounded by these very imposing walls. And one of the reasons I stuck the Renoir version on after was I was just thinking, like, how is the approach to the mise en scène very different? Because if it's the same, if they're all just kind of living in some slum deep down, maybe that's just a part of the play rather than an invention of Kurosawa's or part of this adaptation. And everything's very flat and kind of very standard in that one. So, and after the Kurosawa one, that feels like a real letdown, because you've got such a. It's interesting that even though this is on such a limited space, where it's like a set with two houses on it and a little bit of room outside, he still managed to, in what is his least cinematic film possibly, have quite a cinematic visual sort of conceit around the outside of it there.
Yeah. Like, and then you can imagine that. You can imagine it being. It's weird. It's like, you can imagine on stage, like set design, you've got the set design. You can imagine something along the backdrops that would give you that sense of cliffs and the kind of, but it does just having that little, it's not a coda because it's at the beginning, having that little prologue shot and then sort of coming down with the titles, and then the titles fading out and it actually starting in the film, just kind of framing it cinematically and then going, right, that's your lot, you're on set now. It completely establishes that, and then kind of, because one of the things I was wondering about all the way through was like, how do they get to the tavern? Like, is there a way up? Do they have to climb up this? How do they get there? This is like, how do they get out of this hole? And there's even a little swamp at one point as well, which I was quite happy to see the return of.
You mentioned earlier about how this might have alienated people who were more in the vibe for a Seven Samurai type Kurosawa experience.
Oh, it would,
and,
yeah.
And in the Ritchie book, he does mention that this was a critical and commercial failure in Japan when it came out, and that he generalizes that the Japanese attitude towards it is that the film had a negative attitude. And one of the things that plays into that, I think, is that Kurosawa sets this in the Edo period. He takes this and puts it into the Edo period, which is the kind of, I think it's like the early 1600s to the mid 1800s. And this is a period in Japan traditionally that's viewed with great romanticism. And it's a period of like, that's always depicted with a certain kind of very sort of, I don't know, high class, very, very, very cool. Well, not cool is probably the wrong word, but things are clean, things are well done, things are beautiful. You know,
this is like the
period films.
It's like the anti-Forrest Gump, the way that the baby boomers look back at the 60s and ignore all the racism and mass killing in Vietnam and all that kind of stuff.
Basically, so basically, like, he attributes some of that criticism as well, and some of that feeling among Japanese audiences to them being kind of upset seeing the Edo period portrayed as being really like full of squalor. And Kurosawa, who you know is ever the kind of realist at this point, he's really part of realism in cinema at this stage, and he's always looking to put realism even into his Macbeth with its moving trees and its witch. He's still got that kind of eye for trying to keep things grounded and trying to make them sort of like realistic. And he's doing the Edo period, and he's acknowledging that it was a time of great squalor for the majority of people, you know, which is interesting. And
but I wouldn't really necessarily think of it as negative. Yes, people are kind of up against it, but I found that there was a lot of positivity in it, and a lot of humanity and life in the lower depths.
Yeah, I want to read out one last piece of the Ritchie. Because he goes into quite some detail about Mifune's performance. It was interesting hearing from you. Kind of, I think I get the impression Mifune's aspect of the film is your least favorite.
Yeah, Mifune didn't make much of an impact for me. Like,
okay, because Ritchie says, one might single out Mifune's performance. His mimicry is flawless. Every one of the recognized details of the Yakuza is there. The mock toughness, the little boy angularity of gesture, the abrupt shift of his kimono skirt, the calculated vulgarity of his squat, the sudden warmth of his smile, the nastiness, the sexiness, the innocence, the danger. All of this is continually before us. Yet, as in any great performance, it is varied by the person with whom he's acting. Here, Mifune's timing seems almost miraculous. His reactions take precisely the right amount of time, not 1 second more or less than required. He goes
sounds like he had a paragraph to fill to me, to be honest. I thought he was all right. Like, I to be honest, who stood out more? The Pilgrim stood out more to me.
Yeah, I was going to say that. My favorite in it is him.
And Chiaki, I thought was really good. I really liked seeing him. And the Tinkerer's wife as well was really good. There's this kind of even though she had about 3 things to say, like it, and the actor, I found the ensemble much more interesting because you only get little glimpses of them really, and you know, the actor especially, you get a sense of that they have got this deeper life that's long since abandoned them, and I found that much more interesting than a love triangle, especially when it took me a while to realize that the landlady was married to that they were married basically. But yeah, I thought this was okay, and I quite enjoyed it.
where was Takashi Shimura though? You could have made him the landlord. Could have made him well, really only the landlord. I think you could possibly have made him, but maybe he'd have been too warm. I wouldn't have liked to have seen Takashi Shimura murdered.
Yeah, I mean, possibly the Pilgrim, but I think the Pilgrim did need to be that much older. I think.
Yeah. Also, that actor whose name I will bring up on screen again, Bokuzen Hidari, always has this very he looks very kind of frail, doesn't he? Like possibly old and frail beyond his actual years. Like he's kind of this very gangly, awkward kind of looking guy with this very strange smile that's very memorable. And I think Shimura would have looked too healthy to be in the house. Like, I don't mean that in a really negative way. I just mean that like the actors he's cast there, they're all kind of done to be kind of emaciated. They're all done like to have like some of them have like really bad like prosthetic teeth and things like that. And I think like having that character be Takashi Shimura would have had too much like nobility, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So all in all, I'm gonna share my screen for the
I feel like for this it's like a nudge over halfway in both categories.
Okay. You can see I've already put it where I want it. Where do you want to put it? You want to nudge over halfway in both categories. So
yeah.
So like there?
Around the most beautiful. Yeah, probably.
Did you enjoy it more than the most beautiful?
The most beautiful was
The Women in the Factory.
Women in the Factory.
Which would you bang on again right now for a rewatch?
I'm going to put them on a par base. I think.
Okay.
I think I'm thinking about it, and I'm already getting the sense that on any given day that would change.
Okay, and appreciation-wise, more or less?
Probably slightly less.
Slightly less. Okay. Okay. Yeah. See, I'm like I said beforehand on this, I had it way down in appreciation and not enjoyment, because I really do think as funny as that obviously is to you, I really do think the staging and the blocking is really good, and that kind of makes it. I don't know. I'm sure it is. It just seems like good things.
It just seems like damning with faint praise.
I really don't mean it like that at all. Like, I was really impressed by it. That's something you get. I mean, if you find that kind of not that praiseworthy here, then I don't think Ozu's for you, because Ozu's all about that. Ozu is static shots of interiors of houses where people move around in interesting ways and are kind of layered throughout the background and things like that. So for me, it reminded me sort of that, which I think is really formally. I think he showed great skill with the way a lot of that was done. Because that's also not easy, I would imagine. Like, I've not tried blocking out a play, but I imagine trying to make sure everyone's in an interesting spot and all doing something interesting is very difficult to achieve, especially when you do everything very much. Look, a lot of this film seemed to be shot in single takes, didn't it, as well? Like, a lot of it's just long, unbroken single takes. So no wonder they rehearsed it very extensively as well.
Do you think if someone went back in and re-edited it with studio audience laughter, you might get a little bit more out of it?
I think I would get more out of it if it was in English or if I spoke Japanese, because the reason I say that is because normally for me, very theatrical films, very stagey films where they're basically stage plays, a lot of the joy of them comes to really being able to appreciate the enunciation of certain things, the way things are being said, the tone of them. I'm sure if I spoke Japanese or understood Japanese, there are ways in which they're bantering off each other that would kind of be sing-songy, that would kind of have a rhythm to it that I'm not picking up and I'm reading. It's like I kind of imagine, like, one of the joys to cite a film we both know very well and we both like a lot, like The Big Lebowski. What can you imagine if your own experience of The Big Lebowski was watching it subtitles and you didn't understand English? Because to me, so much of The Big Lebowski is the rhythm of how things are said, the way they play off each other, and the way that kind of comes across. And quite often, when you're watching, like, I've seen, for example, the film Jeffrey Bernard's Unwell, that's just Peter O'Toole on his own on a stage. And that's not boring because you've got his his way of delivery is part of what's captivating, right? That's kind of what draws you into it. So I'm wondering if I understood all that, whether it would have a lot more resonance and I would be able to sort of enjoy that aspect of it a lot more. As it was, because I didn't feel like I was able to pick up on those nuances, and because I didn't really feel like I was able to pick up on those kind of details of those characters, it left me just kind of alienated slightly from it, and it made it more of a kind of intellectual exercise than something I was actively emotionally invested in, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, no. Yeah. I mean, it also, there's loads of things you don't pick up on, is it? Like intonation, accents, dialects, things
exactly.
like that are all loaded, that just take away so much meaning or kind of coded information.
But it's interesting we've likened it already to Mike Leigh, because again, if you watch Mike Leigh in subtitles, or if you didn't really understand different British accents and things, a lot of the pleasure of those films is people coming in with very deliberately strange ways of speaking, repeated phrases, tics in the way they speak. And I wonder, like, you could kind of tell from the way you
wouldn't get I've got no idea how Timothy Spall's character in Life is Sweet translates to a non-English speaker.
Exactly. It would be so difficult. And you get senses that the characters have this very strong delineation and different personalities. You do get that come across. Like, you get the sense that the actor character in our subtitles are often different, the ways we're watching it. In my version, he kept saying vital organs.
That was one I saw. Yeah,
that's what I saw. So obviously he's speaking. That's presumably a kind of transcreation where that's not exactly how he's doing it wrong in Japanese, but it's kind of a similar thing. And like I wonder, therefore, like, you kind of get a sense listening to him that he's speaking with a slight, I don't know, maybe lisp isn't the right word, but he's kind of, his mouth is very, he's not speaking very clearly. He's not speaking very well. He's not enunciating.
He could be even that he's actually getting the word wrong, and that it's saying something about his intelligence, or, I mean, I don't know what vital refers to, but that sort of, there's all sorts of things that you could not be picking up on.
Yeah, possibly. And so I think it's things like that where I think I would enjoy it a lot more if I was able to understand the language. I would go as far as to say that if I could understand Japanese, this possibly would be a really enjoyable film for me, rather than a boring one. But I did fall asleep twice during this yesterday, and I had to rewind it and watch the bits again. So, not optimal conditions, I guess.
No, watch it in bed.
But I would have definitely just fallen asleep through the whole thing if I'd been in bed. This was me sitting up, and I'm not old enough yet that I sleep sitting up on the sofa that regularly. I'm sure it's coming.
Yeah, it's not far off down the line.
It's not far off.
Speaking of not far off.
Okay, so not far off for us now is the Hidden Fortress, which do you know? Well, there's not an elegant way to ask that question. Do you know the aspect ratio of the film? I was leading in to ask, like, do you know that it's widescreen? It's his first widescreen film?
I know it's his first widescreen film, and I know what a lot of people know about it, that it was the inspiration for Star Wars. So I'm expecting an adventure film. I'm really curious. The only thing that I really know for definite about the kind of Star Wars connection is there's two sort of low class bickering characters who kind of guide you through it in a way that R2D2 and C3PO do. But I'm wondering how closely it's going to stick to how closely Star Wars will mirror it, because I know there's a princess, and presumably, in my mind, the Hidden Fortress is the Death Star. I'm wondering how closely. That's what I'm curious about, basically.
Yeah,
is how many of the story beats hit.
I would say, and I know you're not a massive Star Wars fan anyway, so this possibly won't be as big a thing.
I mean, I'm not a massive Star Wars fan, but I was born in 1982. I've seen it countless times.
Yeah. But my point was going to be, like, when I first saw Hidden Fortress, I didn't enjoy it that much, and I think it's because I was too much focused on, like, how is this like Star Wars? So I don't know if that's the best way to go into it, but obviously you go into it loaded with what you know about it from the culture, and that's kind of inescapable. But like, so what are you expecting?
I'm expecting some sort of
Like fantasy kind of
some
adventure.
sort of fantasy adventure, kind of hero's quest, kind of relatively uncomplicated story that isn't too loaded. I'm expecting it to be fun. I'm expecting it to look beautiful because of the aspect ratio. And I'm expecting to enjoy this one, which is strange because I was going into this whole endeavor, I was kind of expecting the samurai films that he was most famous for would be the ones that I'd find the least interesting. But after this little 1-2 punch of I don't even remember the film that we talked about.
I Live in Fear, Seven Samurai, then I Live in Fear, and you just like,
after this little 1-2 punch of I Live in Fear and the Lower Depths, I'm back on the samurai train.
We have now arguably the best single run in his career, because we've got The Hidden Fortress, The Bad Sleep World, Yojimbo and Sanjuro, and High and Low. And
Excellent.
Maybe I'll throw Redbeard in there once I've seen it again. I've only seen that once. But yeah, it's a really, really good run. And we're kind of in the final steps of his career of his peak period, basically, of his imperial phase. This is the end sequence, basically, before he goes off and makes films in Russia and can't get a film made in Japan and all this kind of shit.
And then makes a film based on his dreams towards the end, which is the one I'm really not looking forward to.
No, it's a tangent, but no, dreams isn't difficult because it's divided into tiny episodes.
Good.
So you can you can even watch one, go away, come back later.
not to tip your hat. Six or seven films early.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the Lower Depths. That's interesting that we kind of had very different opinions on that one, which hasn't necessarily been the case with the other ones. I'm looking forward to discussing Hidden Fortress, looking forward to watching that again. So hopefully we'll be back to do that next weekend. But yeah, in the meantime, I've been Rob, this has been Craig, and thank you very much for watching.
Cheers. Bye-bye.